The darkest Batman yet. The Batman. Just opened tonight in Denver. I got to see it at the theater, and I'm going to give you my review here. Basically, it's a pretty okay movie. I liked it overall. Matt Reeves directed it. What he's known for mostly are a couple of the Planet of the Apes reboot movies. And about 5-6 years ago, a couple of those Planet of the Apes movies. I didn't care for either one of those movies. He also directed a movie called Cloverfield, which I never saw. It was got some critical good praise and reviews. I didn't see that one. I think I tried to watch it one time. I just couldn't get into it, but maybe it's better than I thought. This is the darkest Batman yet, not just overall in the storyline, but in the visual. If you have a small TV, you're going to watch it, even a flat screen big one, but it's not a real big one or 4K, it's probably not going to look very good. I recommend you go see this if you're a Batman fan of the series, of any of the Batman movies, especially the Dark Knight trilogy or any of these other ones that have been out, even going back to the Tim Burton ones. We'll talk about all these in a minute. And of course, I grew up with the first Batman series in the 60s, the Adam West, typical, the Burt Young, was it? Or not, no, Burt Ward, basically, Robin. Those were just ridiculous, campy series. Nothing like the real Batman that I grew up with reading the comics as a kid. I remember buying the comics 10 cents and then 12 cents and then 15 cents. And those were really great comics, the Batman comics. But basically this movie, it takes place in Gotham City. We've got a lot of our familiar characters back. Matt Reeves, as they say, I don't know why they picked him to direct the film. He does have a good eye visually, but the composition of the scenes is kind of lacking. It's mostly very operatic drama with like 4 or 5 really intense action scenes thrown in here and there over 2.5 hours. So it's not all in all an all-out action movie. Nothing like, let's say, basically the Matrix movie that came out. That was all action nonstop. It was stupid, too much CGI that was so obvious. This movie, the CGI, the visual effects, industrial lights and effects, the old Lucas program there out in California company, they're still around like 45 years later, still cranking out some good special effects. So I thought the visual effects were very good. It's a very dark movie. You probably want to see it in the IMAX format if you can, or see it on the biggest, best screen with the best lighting that you can. I saw it on a fairly small screen, so it was not overly impressive, not sound-wise either, but I'll get to that in a minute. The music, there's a scatter of songs in there, maybe 15 songs at the most. Most of them are not very memorable, except Nirvana, Something in the Way. That plays at 2 different times in the movie. Powerful song from their Nevermind album, and I think you'll enjoy when that song plays. I did. Basically, I'd like to see a Batman movie done kind of like Frank Miller's Sin City. Black and white with really sort of a more animated looking style to it, so it would look more like a real comic book movie, but without looking cartoonish necessarily like a cartoon. Look realistic, but have that comic book effect in black and white. I think that would be so powerful. This film's almost black and white. There is color, but it's muted color throughout for the most part. But as I say, it's very realistic. Now you got Robert Pattinson, who I like as an actor. He's a terrific actor. He, in my opinion, is the best Batman yet. He looks the most like Bruce Wayne and Batman in the comic book. He's got that sculpted jaw that's kind of wide. Michael Keaton didn't have that, neither did Christian Bale. Neither did Peter Weller. These guys just didn't, none of them looked like Bruce Wayne or Batman to me. And I think the costume really works in this one. So I give Robert Pattinson high marks. He doesn't get a lot of really quality dialogue. His lines in the movie are pretty sparse, but he delivers them with that really low Batman voice that, of course, Michael Keaton started and Christian Bale did also. I guess Peter Weller did. I didn't see those shows. But we don't have Robin, of course. Not going to put Robin in there. But they have a sidekick, Selina Kyle. She's kind of a Catwoman, not like Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman. She's not actually a villain lined up with the Penguin. The Penguin's in this movie too. But this Catwoman is more like an independent Catwoman who he teams up with and sort of working with her on this crime. Now, there's a lot of crime going on in the movie. I don't want to give all these spoilers about all the details. But there's some pretty gross crimes. The movie reminded me a lot of the movie Seven. If you saw that movie with Seven with Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman years ago, directed by David Fincher, very creepy movie. This movie's not nearly as creepy as Seven, not nearly as realistic or believable as Seven, but it looks a little bit at times like that movie. It reminded me of that movie. As they say, Selina Kyle, the Catwoman, she's played by Zoe Kravitz. she's the weak link in the chain acting wise. She's not a great actress. I mean, she may be someday, but she's not right now. And again, her dialogue, none of the writing's great, so I can't fault the actors for that. They have to read the lines they're given by Matt Reeves and the other guy that wrote it. But Zoe Kravitz, she's not too great of an actor. So she's very beautiful and, you know, personable, but she's not a great actor. Now remember Penguin, he was played in the old original Batman TV series by Burgess Meredith, kind of as a buffoon. Danny DeVito, a lot creepier version in the Tim Burton series. And then now we have Colin Farrell, who I could not even recognize in the movie. Wow, what great makeup. Colin Farrell does a great performance. This is a really, really eerie kind of, I don't know what the best description of this penguin would be, but he's very mysterious and very odd and not a guy you would ever trust. Certainly not in a dark alley, not even in a bright room probably. There's no bright rooms in this movie. The Riddler, originally played in the TV series by Frank Gorshin, also to comic effect. Jim Carrey is the Riddler in the Tim Burton series. We didn't see him in the Dark Knight trilogy. And then Paul Dano plays him in this film. He doesn't get a lot of screen time, but when he does, I thought he looked a little bit like John Denver, is what he reminded me of. But he's pretty creepy too. He does a good turn there as the Riddler. Commissioner Gordon has now been reduced to Lieutenant Jim Gordon in this one. And of course, he was played by Pat Hingle back in the Tim Burton series, and Gary Oldman in the Dark Knight series, I'm sorry. And he's played by Jeffrey Wright. I like Jeffrey Wright as an actor. He does a terrific job. He gets a lot of screen time. His portrayal of Lieutenant Gordon is very realistic, more like you would expect a real policeman, lieutenant, to act and behave in many of the situations, given that the film is not overly realistic in a lot of situations. For instance, we have a couple of C4 bombs going off in people's faces, and they come out pretty much unscathed. I mean, they get hurt, but not terribly hurt. That's not very realistic. So a lot of the film's not realistic, of course. It's over the top. Got a James Bond element feel to it at times, with Batman, Robert Pattinson, and his sidekick, Catwoman, Selena Kyle. They reminded me a lot of a James Bond and his girlfriends in the movies. Alfred, who was played in the Tim Burton series by Michael Gough and Michael Caine, of course, in the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight series, he's done by Andy Serkis. I'll tell you, he's really, really good as Alfred. He's an interesting character in the film. I think you will like him. And they have a character that was not in any of the previous films that I know of, played by John Turturro, who's a great character actor. He's very, very dark in the film, very wicked and a nasty guy. And he appeared first in the Frank Miller book, Batman Year One, and then also in the Loeb and Sales comic book, The Long Halloween Batman. But in this show, he's a good villain. I really thought he played an important role in the film. And of course, I don't give away any spoilers about the relationships he has, but there's some interesting twists and turns, I think, as the film goes on. They're not overly exciting. Almost all the situations that happen, I was able to predict what was going to happen. It's very predictable. The plot of the movie, I mean, that's not so much easy to guess as the movie goes on and unfolds. There are a few plot twists and turns that had me guessing a little, but each situation as it occurred, especially the action scenes, I was able to figure out exactly what was going to happen. It was just very predictable to me. So that'd be the downside of it. Although visually, I thought it had a lot of energy when they had the action scenes going on. There's a car chase scene in the movie that I'm not going to compare it to some of the greatest car chase scenes ever, which are considered to be Bullet. My favorite's The French Connection, Gene Hackman. And Baby Driver had some good scenes. Matrix Revolution had a pretty good car scene there. Tenet had a pretty wild one. Road Warrior and Ronin had a good one. But basically, the car chase scene in this movie, it's got a lot of special effects going for it, so it's not overly believable that they're really out there driving these cars. But his Batmobile looks like an airplane with no wings. It's more engine than car. It's really pretty bizarre looking. But I enjoyed that sequence of the movie, and I think you will too. There's a lot of corruption going on in the city, but what we find out is it's not all black and white. The bad guys in the movie are really weeding out the corrupt city government officials. This is playing into what's going on in the world today. The fact that we have government leaders across the board in cities, counties, states, and definitely at the federal level, at the highest federal level today, that are super corrupt. And they ought to be exposed. Whether it takes a criminal to expose them, I mean, look, Edward Snowden's considered a criminal, and he exposed a lot of the hypocrisy and the deceit and the surveillance, illegal surveillance that our government is doing on us today. And the government still portrays him as a criminal, as a bad guy, when the bad guys really are occupying the Oval Office and Congress and the Supreme Court and many other bureaucratic positions in our government today and the cabinet. Those are the real villains, in my opinion, today. I'm not pledging no allegiance to those guys anymore. Never did, never will. Basically, I would say that the end titles are very, very good. I would stay for the credits if I were you. There's an orchestral, it's not all this revved up synthesizer music. It's an orchestral piece of music followed by a beautiful piano piece that's very, very dark and powerful. And then they have indicated that there will be 2 sequels planned to this movie, with probably a lot of the same actors coming back, I imagine, except for John Turturro. Sorry, that's a spoiler. And then there's 2 HBO TV movies planned also to be coming out. There's a scene towards the end that reminded me a little bit of the film The Day After Tomorrow. I don't want to give any spoiler hints, but that part was kind of exciting to some degree, although it could have been done, I think, somewhat differently to greater effect to create a little more concern in the audience for the people on the screen and what they're going through. A lot of it just looked very Hollywoodish, even though it's a Hollywood film. Warner Brothers distributes this film, but it was shot in London and England and elsewhere in the UK. There were other countries, New Zealand and Australia, involved in the making of the film. I just overall going to give it a modest thumbs up. I will probably see it again, maybe in the IMAX, just to see if it really plays that much better. And a lot of films will play better in IMAX, of course, because they're going to look and sound a whole lot better than it would when I saw it. I don't recommend you wait and see this on your home screen. It's just going to be too dark. You're probably going to fall asleep at the slow parts. That's my prediction. Maybe you won't, but I think some people will for sure, because it does slow down a couple times, and I found myself yawning and thinking, oh, come on. It's got to, get a little more something happening here. But overall, I like the film, so I'm going to give it a modest recommendation. The Batman, check it out if you're a fan. Even if you're not, if you like good dramas with a little bit of heavy-duty action, I think you'll enjoy it.